Welcome to the Copenhagen History Project. My name is Patrick and the project is meant to show the fantastic history of the city of Copenhagen. A defining feature of the city is the split of the Copenhagen Canal, which has been bridged continuously through the years, but it would likely surprise most locals that this body of water used to be a lot wider and the accompanying canals were bigger and more numerous than today. In fact, it's rather astonishing how much not just the land reclamation has changed the harbourfront, but also how much the use of the harbour has defined the entire city, and therefore how the city developed through history. Perhaps the best example of the change and history of the harbour of Copenhagen is on the Børsbrygge, in English the Stock Exchange Quay, standing above the kayak bar. This is my favourite place in Copenhagen, and this only makes sense if you stand there and look at the past, since the present is mainly a view of traffic going through some major landmarks. Without knowing the past, one would arguably choose to go a little further down the street to enjoy the less busy place for a favorite place. In essence, the present-day kayak bar has the view of the absolute center of the kingdom at the height of its power. To the left we have the Børs building, this is the stock exchange. The Christiansborg Palace, now a place of parliament and throne room, but previously the original site of the first fortress of the city, placed on a sandbank in the sea. The tower stands on this ruin, showing just exactly how much land has been reclaimed beyond that now. Next to the palace church is visible, still the main chapel for religious celebrations and funerals of the royal family. In the background you see the tower of the St. Nikolai Church. This is the third version of the tower, the first one being knocked over by the wind because it was so massive, the second one burning down in the fire of 1795 along with the rest of the church, and this one being the third version. In front of this church is another odd-looking church. This is Holmskirke, the Church of the Navy, which looks so different because it used to be the anchor smithy for the Navy before being converted from practical to spiritual assistance. Holmskirke also signifies the corner of what used to be the naval shipyard on Bremerholm, which is the body of land along the canal seen in front of the kayak bar. This shipyard used to signify around a third of the entire city, and therefore all you can see across the water in front of kayak bar was the naval yards, now replaced by the National Bank of Denmark. Needless to say, the canal here used to be much wider, as ships of war were directly launched into the canal in front of where the bar is now placed. From this canal right in front of Holmskirke, another branch of the canal used to run all along the way to Kongens Nytorv, where it almost met up with three other canals of the yard, only separated by the square itself and a few accompanying buildings. Only the famous Nyhavn is left of these four canals, and it begs to imagine how wonderful Copenhagen would be with four different versions of Nyhavn. Looking along Bremerholm, we see the main Copenhagen Canal that separates the city. This was not always the case, as Copenhagen used to be only on the left side as seen from here, and Bremerholm, as with Slotsholmen, used to be a sandbank in the sea. Across the canal is Christianshavn, now a sprawling home of the famous Christiania Free State, but originally built by Christian IV as for Dutch craftsmen as an independent city as part of a larger effort of enhancing the entire city. Later, Christianshavn would become ever more important as a naval yard and naval base, with one of the first dry docks being right next to the large warehouse building. As the naval yard slowly needed to expand and the canal in front of Kayak Bar became too small to launch ships into it, Christianshavn would be expanded to Nyholm further out along the Copenhagen Canal to be the new base of the Navy from 1680. Nyholm, which is from where the cranes stand, acted as a main naval base until 1993, and much of it is still naval property. However, some has found new use, for example being the island of the Opera House. While the Navy moved out of the central harbour, the merchant marine did not, and Gamle Strand across from Christiansborg Palace, literally meaning Old Beach, is a testimony to its origin, was famously still a fish market as late as 1954, while the canals and quays were packed with warehouses for the increasing trade. As Copenhagen started to expand along the canal, the land reclamation and harbour fronts grew with it, initially with Frederiksstaden following mostly the existing coastline, where the new palace for the royal family, Amalienborg, was built in the new neighbourhood. This was fortunate as the statue of Frederick VII in the square was famously so heavy it took 200 sailors to heave it in place from the barge it came from. This statue is also claimed by some sources to have been even more expensive than the new palace itself. Far later, Maersk, the largest company in Denmark and the largest shipping company in the world, would situate its headquarters along the same quay. After the industrialization of Denmark and the opening of the city beyond the old defenses, this reclamation and expansion of the harbour would drastically increase. Perhaps best exemplified by Burmeister and Vine, a naval yard that started in Christianshavn as Burmeister and Burgarden but would move out on the newly created Refshaleøen, which was formerly sandbanks in the harbour inlet. Burmeister and Vine would become an employer of as many as 10,000 people, and their buildings are still very much visible from across the water, where the Little Mermaid is sitting on a large stone a few meters from the coast. Still further, we have Copenhagen's Nyhavn, or Free Harbour, built during the height of industrialization to facilitate the trade and shipping that is the foundation of Denmark today. With a tax-free harbour for shipping companies to use, only the products leaving the harbour area would be taxable, and so gave trade more flexibility to prosper. Now, still a business district, the Free Harbour is another example of how Copenhagen has developed, as it is now the home of tech companies and offices, rather than factories and shipping, which has moved further out still. Between these two areas, we have the Tre Kroner Fort, literally meaning the Fort of Three Crowns. This is part of the later fortification of Copenhagen from after the initial bastions were laid down. It is now a tourist destination. Nyhavn being the most famous part of the city, I have saved it for last. Invented by Christian IV as part of a much larger network of canals that were never built, and executed by his son as so many other of his ideas, Nyhavn functioned almost as an independent trading port like Christianshavn and Gamle Strand, with different cargo being shipped to different quays. Nyhavn's current atmosphere is therefore a legacy of the sailors that came home and enjoyed themselves, something that had continued well after Nyhavn's size did not fit modern vessels. The buildings themselves are as old as the harbour, and most date back to 1700, which is only possible because this area was never affected by the three fires that ravaged almost all other parts of the city. This makes the area one of the oldest still standing in the city. It feels great to be reminded that the lively nature of this place is almost 300 years old now, and that every summer evening has found a party at Nyhavn for this long. With Nyhavn, we have seen the most important parts of the harbour, and while we could talk about other places like the war harbour of Christian IV, I want to save this for another time. Thanks for watching.